Hello there and welcome to this attempt at a tutorial. I'm about to make a game here, my own homebrewed version of Second Chance, and I've seen so many questions about how do you cut out the cards that I thought I should show you how I do it. First of all, I've printed out the pages, as obviously seen here. And earlier today I gave them a quick spray of varnish. This is some really cheap version that I found yesterday and seems to do work just fine. The first thing I do is I use this little modeling tool. It isn't really sharp, and just score along the line here. That makes the fold much easier. You can use anything you want to do this with. For example, an old ballpoint pen, anything that isn't sharp, just to help get that crease going for you. And then flatten out the page again. As I score along the line, I don't put too much pressure on it because I don't want to break through the paper. I just want to make it easier to get the fold just along the edge here, just along the dotted lines. And this is obviously a get the fold layout, my preferred way of making cards. I've printed these on label paper. If you want to use normal paper or cardstock or anything like that, you obviously have to use glue or of any some kind, but for me I just peel off a little bit back here, a small line along the long side of the paper, and press it down like this. Then I take some cardstock. This is 160 GSM, a little lighter than I really like, but it's what I have. And I now align it along the fold that I already made, but I place it 1 or 2 millimeters away from the fold. I'm not sure if that really shows through here, but this is so that when I fold it afterwards, it will make a much sharper fold. Jesus, I'm saying the word fold too many times here. So just make it all smooth. Then go to the other side, peel off a little bit, and then fold it along the crease you made earlier, I made. Press it down and smooth out. And if you happen to get a small pocket of air like this, you can always massage it out, so no big worries. And for one sheet like this, you can usually have 2 sheets of this paper folded around. Doesn't matter if it's A4 or letter size. And the same applies here. Just smooth it down, flip over, pull up a little bit, and then repeat on the other side. Now, one of the advantages of using label paper like this is that I don't have to wait for the glue to dry. Another disadvantage is that the rotary tool or knife that I have used tend to get a little bit of glue stuck around the edges here. I tend to use a little bit of rubbing alcohol when I'm done to clean up the gluey residues. I have a whole bunch of these, but just to save you from boredom, I will use those, make those off camera. Now, the first thing to do when cutting these is to know, always cut from the back side of the cards. That way you can ensure that they always look exactly the same. If you get a little bit, okay, this is a bad example, but if you get a little bit off on the front side, that doesn't really matter. But when you make cards that's supposed to be shuffled, and you get some misalignment on the backs, it will be really obvious. So I align along the long edge of the paper, just taking my straight ruler and making sure it's absolutely in the right spot. Then I cut along that. Use a knife or rotary tool or whatever you want to do. I will not recommend using a guillotine or a paper cutter, because then you can't do this, which is leaving a little bit of edge stuck on the end. And the same on the other side. I'll show you why I do this in a little while. And then let's do the other part. By the way, one tip with a rotary tool: always cut away from you, that way you have much more control, and go slow, don't rush it. Should be obvious, but when you're in a rush to get things done, you tend to forget that last part. Okay, now I have a long slit along both sides of the cards, and to cut out the short edges, you can do it the long or the fast or the slow way. The slow way is to start in the middle and cut, but don't cut through, just like you did on the long side, like this. Turn it around and cut so that you always cut away from the thing you're cutting out. Oh, want to rephrase that. You don't cut, you make sure that the scrap that you don't want is the one you may cut over if you do something wrong. So when I do this, I turn like this, place the ruler over the part that I want to keep and don't want to ruin, and then cut. This is if you are really anal, kind of like me, and want to make the best cards possible and don't want to leave things up to chance. I mean, perhaps you have a hiccup, someone startles you or something, and suddenly the card is ruined. If you cut like this, there's a much smaller chance of that. And done with this one. All that's required for them is to cut off the corners, but we'll do that in a little while. Now, the fast way to cut out these cards is to simply start at one edge and cut all the way through. Then do the same. Don't bother turning them around, but when you're cutting with the part where you want to keep the card, always go a little bit slower, just in case. This is slightly faster than the first technique, but there's a little bit more chance of cutting wrong. Oh, and just a safety tip, when using a rotary cutter like this, or a knife in general, always make sure you don't have your fingertips over the edge. Kind of obvious, but I've not followed that before. You learn from your mistakes, or at least you try to. And for the last bit, just to have a little bit more to hold down with, I'll turn the card. And that's the 8 first cards. They look pretty nice, if I'll say so myself. And now for cutting cards. This is a crocodile copy thing I found from AliExpress. Cost me 160 Norwegian crowns. That's about $15, I think. Perhaps a little less. And just like with cutting the cards, I always round the cards from the back side. And that way I end up with rather nice rounded edges and playing cards that feel kind of good. As I mentioned at the beginning, I like them to be a little bit thicker, but this is the cardstock I had right now. So thank you for watching, and make sure you make some good games. Have fun.